Yeah. So this is the third time we've hit this. We did the introduction of the budget on August 29th. That was that first presentation PowerPoint that kind of did an overview of both the 5-year capital plan and the 1-year capital budget. And then our second time we met on it was on the 6th, and we went project by project and got in more into the details of all the projects in the 2017 budget, along with how those are prioritized. We made some edits on how we organize those, added a new category for regulatory required projects. And also some feedback from that one that was in this updated draft final, that I'm calling it for now, because it's definitely not final until we get to November. Instead of a cutoff line, we've designated those last 4 or 5 projects as just low priority projects, just to signify that if we can get to those, that we will, but it could very likely those would spill over into the following year. Beyond that, the total capital budget for 2017 as it exists today is there's $9,376,000 from the Port's Capital Improvement Fund, $771,910 from anticipated state and federal grants, and those include a total of 34 projects for 2017. So the documents as they're in your packet are the same as they would appear in the budget. So while they're not the final product, they're in the format that they will be in, and if there are any additional feedback or changes, additions, deletions, then so that feedback we commission.
I know we talked about number 5, item project number 5, but we still gonna keep that in that position?
Well, I left it there. You know, later in this meeting we'll be I'll be asking you to authorize a contract to start the design process. Whether or not we want to move forward from there, we may want to decide once it's designed, we have a more refined cost estimate. So it's in the budget now. It could be struck. It could be, you know, I think our plan moving forward is to get through design and to apply for grant funding. We've been coming up with a few different options for grants.
What are they?
You know, I knew you were going to ask that since I said it, and I don't have it off the top of my head.
Okay.
I asked Jesse to look into it, and he gave me about 4 different opportunities we could look into. One was the EDA, one again was one of them, but there are a couple other opportunities we could look into. There's curb funding and loans.
1-to-1 kind of?
EDA is 1-to-1. Curb would likely be a low interest loan to do it. They do have some grant funding, but it's pretty minimal. There are a couple other opportunities. Rural development opportunities.
USDA development, and maybe one there was maybe one other one.
Small shipyard grant might have been available for that, but
What
if we get grant funding, it makes sense to go ahead and proceed. I think that also depends on our as we're working through the Marine Trade Industrial Park, the design conceptual plan. As we get through that, we may go, yeah, wow, we really need to proceed, or okay, let's make sure we try to get the grant funding first before proceeding. So I think it's worthwhile having in the budget, and that its position in the budget will depend on what we find out with grant funding and how the rest of the design goes for the Marine Trade Industrial Park.
there are really, you know, 2 ways you could look at it. You could strike it from the budget or keep some funding in there in the budget, and then you could always add it later. Or you could keep in the budget and decide to not do it based on whether or not we're able to get funding. So
I think that's an important part when we're building out a Marine Trade Industrial Park and how we go out and market that park and everything else. I think it's important that we have the design done. We're focused on grant. We've made a commitment to go.
And so we'll still go working on or do you have a good sense of what the operational cost will be?
I don't know about a good sense, but we've done some estimating on that.
Regardless of what it costs to build it,
Yeah.
it should still be about the same operational
Well, the
cost?
operational cost depends on its usage. But based on, we kinda took what what we had for 2015 in years past, that there would be a 20% increase to what we've seen, because now that facility will be right there and likely be utilized even more than just what currently is going down in our boatyard. And based on some information we got from the consultants and what we estimate our facility maintenance labor would do, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $60,000 annually to operate and maintain that facility.
Is it, two questions, I assume with that it'll be a much more, environmentally friendly system that we have, or no?
In our current system,
Than the
or?
current system, yeah, than
No.
currently what we use?
Not really. I
It
mean, we're
won't.
both treating the stormwater to meet wastewater standards. So, and they discharge to the city of Fort Angeles wastewater system.
Okay.
There are still solids that have to be dealt with as hazardous waste, whether it's
It's not
down
an
in the-
improved system, it's just a.
I think it's it is an improved system, as it takes much less labor. Right now, we have to go in down there and people have to man it the whole time the system is working. They're adding, they're dumping in chemicals, and then they're testing it and seeing if it's meeting standards, and then we're done. That, probably takes 4 to 6 hours of labor each time they batch treat 1,400 gallons of water. This one would store up all the water, and then you push a button from your computer or your smartphone, and it treats the water. And then, all you do is have to go down and ensure that all the, Kaizen and other things are set up right. So it's much more of a hands-off system. So in a fully built-out scenario, it's definitely where you want to be going versus what we have at our small boatyard.
And part of it is that there's certain standards we have to meet, whether it's regulations to meet it or not. And the idea is that eventually there would be more volume going through it, but to build out a new industrial park. And what we're not taking into consideration is right now our tenants are collecting stormwater stuff and bringing it over for treatment versus it being self-contained there, so there's quite a bit of differences.
So what I was wondering, what I was trying to get at, is there a possibility to get the grant based on the improved environmental process?
I don't think so. I don't think you're seeing an actual improved, because it's all going to wastewater treatment plant, and we have to meet those standards. And our current one meets those standards, and our new one would meet those standards.
So if people do wash down their boats at the existing boatyard, are obviously some boats can't be handled there, depending on size, but how will the rates compare between the two locations?
There will be, my understanding, there'll be different with pricing. The new New England Industrial Park, the concept is to price it on, linear foot.
I think it was per foot, and there's also a time element to it. So, there'd be a minimum time, and then if it takes longer than that, there are additional charges. I think it's a model, because it's a really dirty boat, and they're washing it down a long time, costs more to operate and more to treat, so.
But then couldn't a small boat, is that the larger, newer boat, wash down facility isn't being used, couldn't someone bring it over to that one, and would it be?
If it's worth our moving out the travel,
Takes quite some time.
And labor out there, the cost add up every time you need something, so it's the time.
Okay.
That was the idea, of having it right there by our travel lift, is that time, because you need spotters and different things, and labor's expensive.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's important to have this placeholder in the budget as we have it now. I think it's important to move ahead with the design, the conceptual design, because that will help us in developing the Marine Trades Industrial Park. And then however far we get on the construction of it this year, at least that placeholder's in here.
That's how we anticipate it.
Do you think the numbers are still where they should be, so it's the first committed project?
As far as priority wise,
Yeah.
I think if we were to rate it based on our current system of job return on investment, environmental benefit, strategic planning importance. I think it, I think those numbers.
It's been a strong strategic initiative for the representation
Okay.
part, so I think it's appropriate when it's there, I think we
If we
just don't
had-
wanna miss an opportunity
Yeah.
from grant funding for it.
Okay.
Right.
My only thought was that if we decided we needed to delay for some reason, that if it's, you know, the number one item, that seems like we committed ourselves even further.
I think that, any delay would be based on finding a field grant opportunity.
Okay.
And what additional information we find out from the Marine Trades Industrial Park plan.
Okay.
So the two go hand in hand, we're just
Yeah.
saying it's a high priority, the two go
It's a
hand in hand,
placeholder.
and we'll
Right.
Yeah.
work
Okay.
it in at the appropriate
Okay.
time.
I feel good about that. Okay. Me too. Good. Alright, and that was my only question since we had talked about it last time around.
Okay.
I appreciated very much your, extending out to 2020 to show how, not just the current projects that we have in here, but there's still some finishing things to do with it in the future. But,
Oh, yes, yep. Got it.
but going on into other projects that we're to look at through 2021, and I was thinking that this year would be kind of the last hefty year for a couple of years, and, obviously, we have, very grandiose plans for port property, so.
Well, you know, I try to, every project that's a viable project, I try to get on the
Mhm.
list.
Yes.
Obviously, we don't have the, you know, probably the ability to complete every single one of these projects in the
Mhm.
5-year plan.
Right.
And there's a number of reasons to have them on there, you know,
Yes.
just from a planning perspective, to realize, you know, these are important projects in the future, but also, when you do go after grant funding, having a project, you know, that's why we like to get projects in all these different regional
Yes.
plans, we like to have projects in a 5-year plan, so when we apply for a grant, we say, within the port's 5-year capital improvement plan, we complete this, and it just gives us more strength.
Yep.
Yeah, and I know there's a number of projects that are really high level that aren't even on these lists,
Yes.
lists.
Well, and I make note of the monies that we will have to look at to do some reconstruction and some rehab work to some of the existing facilities. So, and that's always something, as you build more, you have more to maintain.
We do.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
And hopefully you have more revenue.
Exactly.
Hopefully.
Exactly.
You know, we look at, about $2 million in depreciation a year, you know, and that's, you know, accounting-based number, but it is kind of a number that I keep in my head when I look at our capital improvement plans. That's why we separate maintenance and new. We keep
Yeah.
that, are we spending enough money on maintenance? Because if you don't, over time, you get yourself in trouble.
Mhm. Yep, okay. Commissioner Beauvais, did you have any other comments on the
No.
capital budget, or did I? Okay,
Thank you.
well, we can move into approval of consent agenda.